chances are, if you're in this, have joined this webinar, that you already have VBVoice installed either as a development environment or in a production system. What we're going to address today, though, is more geared towards a production system. A development system is pretty straightforward in that you don't typically find dialogic drivers installed on a development system. You can, of course, for debugging purposes and testing purposes, but by and large, when we're focused on upgrades, what we're doing is we're looking to upgrade the application. So yes, upgrading the VBVoice component in the development machine, but for production, we're also looking at the dialogic component, which is what we're going to do here as well. So we'll be looking at the IVR as a whole. So the big question is, what is the motivation to start looking at doing upgrades? Well, you may have an older system running VBVoice, older hardware that may be coming up on its end of life, may be becoming more prone to errors. You may be having some sort of disk errors at some point. Old operating systems, we have seen customers running old operating systems, old systems in general. So, based on a Windows 2000 platform, eventually, yes, it is time to upgrade and keep up with the rest of the network. So the big thing with VBVoice 8, and as we have done in the past, is that we support the current version of VBVoice and 2 releases back. Now, with the release of VBVoice 8, what that means is that we support VBVoice 7.0, 7.1, and VBVoice 8. So that means that if you're currently using VBVoice 5.6.x, you are definitely going to be looking at upgrading to stay with the latest. Why would you want to upgrade? Well, you're getting not only the upkeep, but the latest versions of operating systems and hardware, but all the patches, fixes that come along with new versions, be it VBVoice or Dialogic. Now, with VBVoice 8, we're looking at the latest in operating systems. Dialogic is currently testing out for Windows 8 drivers and for Windows Server 2012 drivers. Currently, we support VBVoice 8 in the development environment on Windows 8 or Server 2012, but of course we still support Windows 7 and Server 2008 in a production environment. As you probably all know, Windows is dropping XP, I think, in the next year, and Server 2003. So we are still supporting XP. We haven't removed anything. Same goes for 2003 operating system. We haven't removed anything, but again, as a part of the IVR upgrade planning, things to consider. Typically, when we start considering an upgrade, we want to start making some plans. Of course, make sure that we're looking at what we have currently. You want to take an inventory. So, how many systems do you have deployed? What versions are they running? Do any of these systems have speech recognition or text-to-speech? What versions? What versions of VBVoice? What versions of Dialogic? A big part with the Dialogic side as well is if you're running a Dialogic TDM board or analog board, you really want to take a look and see what model you have, and comparing it to the list that we have on the VBVoice website to make sure that it is still a supported board with the current drivers that we're making use of. You want to make sure that you've identified where your licenses are for VBVoice, as well for Dialogic HMP. And if it's a really old system like HMP 2.0, there's been some significant changes with the licensing model from Dialogic. So if that is you, definitely contact us, sales@pronexus.com, and we'd be happy to outline the changes that have been made. Basically, it means the addition of a resource for HMP. I think that came about early on in HMP3. So we go through, we do our inventory, okay? We want to make sure to find a centralized place. I know as part of the planning process, we try to put everything into a safe place. In the case of a backup, typically what I find is helpful is to actually create an IVR install folder. Now you can drop everything you need there as far as drivers and VBVoice install folder files go, as well as your licenses. It's ideal to have that on the local box, on the local IVR, and also in a repository somewhere on your network, somewhere so that if that machine does go down in a bad way and can't be recovered, you can still access those licenses. Now, once you've established everything that you have in deployment and you've identified your licenses, you've got the information set aside that you're going to need to redeploy or rebuild the box, you want to start doing backups of the existing configuration file. That would be in for Pronexus VBVoice, that would be the VBVoice.ini file, or VBVoice.ini. That's located in the Windows directory. It's right off of Windows, and you can just copy that off. Again, put it somewhere safe so that you can duplicate or use it as a reference in order to redo the configuration in the new version that you're installing. A good thing too is to have that backed up regardless in the event that, again, you do need to recover a box. Also, worst case scenario, if the upgrade fails and it would be a time crunch situation, you may have to revert back to or roll back to the previous version. So good to have the VBVoice.ini file backed up so that you can rebuild the box. Now, with the speech recognition and text-to-speech components, for the most part, if you are upgrading a box that has speech recognition or text-to-speech, you don't need to uninstall those components. The VBVoice and Dialogic components of the IVR are going to be independent of each other and of the speech recognition or the TTS engine. As a part of the example, what I'm using is Windows 7 operating system and VBVoice 5.6.2. Now, as you may already know, VBVoice didn't support Windows 7 until version VBVoice 7.0. So this is more for demonstration purposes to get us through the procedure, to get an understanding of the files that we're looking for, what to expect when we run the upgrade. So we'll jump right in here. Now, as I said, 5.6.2 is currently installed. VBVoice 5.6.2 is currently installed, as well as Dialogic HMP3 SU241, which was the version that was supported with VBVoice 5.6.2. So at this point, we've done the assessment. We know what's on the machine. We need to find the files to back up. So since let's start with the VBVoice side here. Since we know that the VBVoice ini file is in the Windows directory, we can just go start run, and VBVoice.ini command will get us right to the file. So you can name it anything at this point. We just want to make sure that we have it in a safe place. Now, if you're familiar with the VBVoice ini file, you'll see here that this one is very straightforward. There's no real custom configuration going on here. I've got my card type set, but otherwise these are the defaults that we're dealing with here. So we've got our configuration file backed up. Now I also need to grab my VBVoice license. This is my runtime license here. This is what's required to run, in this case, 2 channels. So this makes 2 channels available to my VBVoice application. Now, what I need to do is just simply back up I'll get to my depository here, and if I go into the folder now, I can see that I have my RT back. Okay, we're done in there now. The other component, like I said, we have is Dialogic. I have a Dialogic HMP license applied here. In this case, it's the 2-port demo license that is available from Dialogic. And again, I need to back it up. Well, if I look right here, I can see that the full path to where it is. Okay, so I could either go through, you know, the file folders, or I could browse from here, which I'm just going to do real quick. Okay, if I copy here. Now, the funny thing is if I cancel out of the browse, I'll lose it off my clipboard. So if at all possible, get it to your folder, or otherwise paste it off. Again, otherwise you'll lose it. And it's already sitting there, so I'm just going to overwrite it. But again, we're collecting the existing system's information here. So I've got my HMP license, I've got my Pronexus license, I've got my Pronexus config file. We're all set to go. There's no text-to-speech on this machine, there's no speech recognition, but again, even if there was, I can leave those alone. We're only upgrading the VBVoice and Dialogic components at this point. There's no need to upgrade the engine unless we are moving to MRCP. So what we want to do is, in any case, in particular on a fresh install, we want to install Dialogic last. The reason for installing Dialogic last is that Dialogic wants to be first in the path. So if we install Dialogic and then Pronexus VBVoice afterwards, we're going to end up with Pronexus VBVoice being first in the path. So what we'll do is we'll do the upgrade to VBVoice first, and then we'll address the Dialogic install. And again, on Windows 7, Server 2008, Windows 8, and Server 2012, we want to right-click and say Run as Admin. We outline that in our install guide, that regardless of the UAC settings or being logged in as a local admin, it's still required to do the right-click and Run as Admin. You may run into an executable that won't run because you're double-clicking it. Well, try right-click and Run as Admin. Same goes for opening any utilities, right-click, Run as Admin always. So this is the VBVoice install for version 8. And right away it's telling me that it's found a previous version. I'm going to go ahead. Right now it's going to uninstall 5.6. This is going to take a few moments here. So let's continue on here. The VBVoice 8 install is done. Now again, we're going to have to avoid the reboots. Just for the simple fact we'll lose our remote, but anyhow. VBVoice 8 is now installed. Okay, right away we can go into the configuration of VBVoice 8. So if you're familiar with the older operating systems, XP in 2003, we would always see our runtime manager icon in the system tray here. That is no longer the case as of Windows 7. There's a separate executable that needs to be run in order to show that icon in the system tray. Okay, the runtime manager that hosts our VBVoice licenses runs in the background as a service. So there's no need to worry about that. You can go and verify that it is there, of course, that it is running. Okay, which it is, and it's always set to automatic by default. Okay, but to get the icon, in the past, previous to VBVoice 8, we would need to go into the Pronexus VBVoice file structure, find the RTM directory, and then run the vbvrtmconfig.exe. Now, with VBVoice 8, we now have a brand new control panel where all of the VBVoice utilities are centralized. Now, again, with the newer operating systems, and this will be in your start menu right off the bat, we want to right-click and say Run as Admin. Once we get into the control panel, we see the key utilities, help file, and access to our log files, all in one spot here. Now that we've opened the VBVoice control panel with the Run as Admin, we don't need to right-click and Run as Admin any longer in order to run any of these utilities. So if we go into the Runtime Manager section here, we can see that we need to run the interface, again, to get that icon. Once we do that, we get our icon, and we can show it so that we can administer the licenses. Okay, you can see here we've upgraded to 8.0. My license is populated automatically after the upgrade, and I just simply need to activate the license. We're done with the RTM. Now, if I go to my VBVoice.ini file, this is the upgraded one now, I can see that my card type has been set back to simulator, which is the default setting. That means that I need to run the VBVoice voice interface installer in order to select the card type. But I'm not quite ready yet. I need to get the proper version of Dialogic driver in there. So until I do that, my configuration with VBVoice is currently done. Again, the config that I'm running right now is very straightforward. There's no custom settings, but we'll get to that in a moment once we upgrade the Dialogic driver. Now, for the Dialogic driver, we're making a pretty significant jump here. We're jumping from HMP3 SU241 to HMP3 SU338. Okay, 338 is the version that we support with the latest VBVoice. Now, what that means is that we can't just install Dialogic over top of itself in order to get the upgrade. What we actually have to do is go through Add Remove Programs and uninstall it. Okay, I do a little mental check. Did I remember to grab my license? Yes, I did. Just confirm that we do want to remove everything. And we'll let this run for a moment here. Okay, so what we would do, in a real life scenario is, yes, we would want to restart here. Okay, but again, for the webinar, we are not, so that we don't lose our connection. However, what I will show you is what would happen next. Now, we've got a unique situation here in that we're not rebooting. However, what we can do is expect to go back, look at the installation files from Dialogic. Okay, even after uninstalling from Add Remove Programs, you are going to see a Dialogic directory still there. Okay, in that case, it's going to be just simply a matter of deleting. Okay, because by that time, what we would expect to happen after the reboot, in every single case of Dialogic, there's a cleanup that runs after the reboot. Okay, just a simple batch file. It goes through, you'll see a command prompt once you're allowed to log into the system. You'll see that running, and it's doing a cleanup of the registry. It's doing a cleanup of all these files and folders. So we can go ahead and run that. Okay, it can ask us to confirm that we do want to uninstall everything, truthfully. We'll let it run. At some point here, we'll probably see it stop. Okay. Sometimes you'll see, at least on the older versions, it would get stuck on an FRU status entry in the command prompt. No fear there, just let it finish. So now if we go back and look, in program files, we can see that it's still there. Okay, this is expected, and it's just simply a matter of deleting it. Now, of course, because I haven't rebooted, I do have services that are running. Okay, so we've cleared out the Dialogic file now, or the Dialogic directory, I should say. As a precaution, you can go and run a third-party cleanup utility like CCleaner, which is available off the internet. It's a good one. To be honest, I'll use it in the case of a system that may get a little bit messed up. But in this case, we're just going to push through with confidence that the new installer is going to take care of everything for us. Again, for a system that you absolutely can't reboot, something like CCleaner would be good. The Dialogic cleanup utility is good, but I find there's still some stuff left over. So CCleaner off the internet is a good option. So again, we're back to a clean install. There's no Dialogic driver installed right now. I'm going to go back to my IVR files here where I've got my VBVoice 8 upgrade files. Find the Dialogic driver 338 and run as admin. Now, we do cover these steps in the VBVoice install guide. It's no different when you're doing an upgrade versus a new install. You can change the path if you'd like. Otherwise, the components to select, again, this is covered in the install guide. For a system that's running voice over IP and no card, no DNI card, all that I need is the core runtime package. I typically recommend to install the demos as well. If there's any issues, we can always baseline test with the demos. They're very useful sometimes. The development package, not so much for us in this case. We're not getting into the HMP API. We're not building on their call stack, anything like that. VBVoice is handling all that communication for us. The circuit connectivity package here, this only applies to DNI cards. Okay, so I don't have a DNI card installed. I'm not going to select it. SNMP component manager, a lot of folks like to enable SNMP monitoring. If you don't plan to monitor Dialogic using SNMP, don't select it. It is going to add some overhead to the system. In fact, there are other ways to monitor the system from a telephony level. This could be as simple as your PBX, which you may already have some failover capabilities to go to to route calls to a different IVR or a backup system. But otherwise, VBVoice ties in with Windows Performance Monitor. So if you're looking to keep track of channels, pull some statistics, it's that simple. You don't need the SNMP monitor here. Okay, so just voice over IP. I'm going to go the core runtime package and the demos. Confirm that I want to install those and let it run here. It'll just take a moment. Okay, so the HMP driver is wrapping up here, and we go back to our checklist and make sure that we are getting the right components. Again, we're going to do Dialogic last, so that's first in the path. Okay, so we're not going to reboot here, but all in all, HMP is installed now. Okay, we've done the Pronexus VBVoice upgrade. Our license is in place. Now we've got Dialogic in place. We still have something outstanding on the Pronexus side, which again was to select the card type. So since we have Dialogic upgraded now, okay, and really you can do everything after the upgrades are done. You can upgrade the software and then go back and do these configurations. Okay, so in that case, the licensing for VBVoice, and while we're addressing VBVoice, we can go in and run the utility to connect VBVoice to Dialogic. So we get back to our control panel here, into our configuration, okay, and we want to run the voice interface installer. It gives us a nice description here, okay, of what it does. Basically, we're telling VBVoice to register a specific DLL based on the driver, and we use that DLL to communicate with Dialogic. So your application is then connected to or talking to the Dialogic driver. So once we run the utility here, takes a moment. Okay, this is the voice interface installer utility. Very simply, it sees that we've installed HMP. We select it as our card type. It's going to tell us here that we're switching from simulator to HMP. We run it, it registers the DLL, and it's done. Okay. If we were to go back in now and look at our configuration file, we can see that it's no longer simulator. It's changed to Intel HMP. So now we know for sure we're talking to Dialogic. In the case of an upgraded system that you're copying the previous VBVoice.ini file from, you cannot just simply copy-paste this setting. Okay? It's not going to register the DLL that we use if you just copy-paste the setting. It's going to try, you'll launch your application, and it'll probably, it will, give you a result of it could not load Dialogic Intel, what's the name now? VBV Intel HMP build.dll. So right away we know if this is set and it throws that error, chances are we just need to run the voice interface installer in order to register it properly. Again, we could have a number of other configurations here from the previous version, which we can simply copy paste in. Okay, anything that shows here now is the defaults. Anything extra has been configured on the system. Once we configure something through VBVconfig, which is the utility to administer VBVoice, we get the changes in the VBVoice INI. So, for example, if I were looking at, say, accept reinvite in a voice over IP situation, and I reload, I can see I've got this custom configuration in here now. This would be one of the items that I would need to move over from the previous VBVoice INI to the new one, okay, or at least go back and duplicate it. Okay, for this one, not too much more to do. VBVoice is configured. We've done the license, we've done the VBVoice INI configuration, we've set the card type. The last thing that we need to do is configure Dialogic. Now again, this is in the VBVoice install guide. What we need to do is apply to the Dialogic HMP license that we had from the previous machine, from the previous install. And since we're dealing with the same machine, the hosting of the Dialogic license wouldn't have changed. We're still looking at the same NIC card that is hosting, or that the license is attached to. Okay? We don't have to pull the license from anywhere in particular. Once we read the file in, we're done with it. Okay? So we go back to our backup folder here, where we've decided to store all of our IVR files. We find our HMP license and apply it and activate it. It gives us the next steps here. We want to go into the Dialogic Configuration Manager, restore device defaults on the HMP device, and then we can start the system. Okay, so we're done in the HMP License Manager. We find our Dialogic Configuration Manager here. Again, always right-click, Run As. We can see our update version here, 338. Just take a moment here. Okay, yes. Local machine. Okay. So this is one of the problems with not doing the reboots. Our device is actually not showing properly here. I should expect to see an HMP software device, which is what I would do the next steps, and restore my device defaults on, and then run it. Okay, so I guess a bit of a gotcha there as far as doing the upgrade without doing reboots. Reboots are pretty key. There are some tricks that we have on the support side to get this to go. We never want to see, we never want to add the device manually. This should always come up automatically. If it does not come up automatically, there is a problem. So after we've done our upgrade, okay, and consider that we've made some significant changes. Not just some versioning changes. Maybe there was no real application change. Due diligence. Try to do some QA, some testing once you've done the upgrade. Make sure that your application is still behaving the way you expect it to, and otherwise, look to do some load testing. If you are making application changes, if you have changed hardware, you're increasing channels, anything like that, even more so, you want to look to load test. Basically, you want to try and break the IVR. Load it with as many calls as you would expect to see in the production environment. Look to try to break it. Basically, enter DTMF when it's not expected. Hang up randomly. Make incorrect menu options. If you're dealing with speech recognition and text-to-speech, test out the confidence of the speech recognition. In text-to-speech, try some poor text, or pull directly from a test database with real data that you're using in the field to make sure that anything, again, there may have been some database upgrade as well, along with the IVR upgrade as a whole. So definitely look to test. That's key. If calling into the system, 50, 100 times at one time is not possible because you're dealing with either a landline or a desk phone or something like that. If you're dealing with a high volume system, then definitely look at considering a test box that's going to drive calls to your production IVR, your staging part, that pre-production stage of the upgrade. So get involved with designing an IVR that's going to call your IVR in order to automate your testing, so that you can put that load on the system overnight, over the weekend. You're not having to sit there and make 100 phone calls at one time, or to push volume through the system. If you're dealing with a high volume system, it's a part of the bigger plan to be able to test that high volume system. Back-to-back testing, basically. You don't necessarily have to put the calls through the telco or through your PBX or through through your VoIP provider. You could test these systems back-to-back, either calling peer-to-peer, across voice over IP, or using a crossover cable to emulate a network end of a T1. If you do have any questions, email us at support@pronexus.com. If you do have some questions about runtime licenses, HMP licenses, be sure and email sales@pronexus.com.